Welcome to Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. You are going to hear the stories from the eclectic life of a guy who is a professional counselor, a family man, a SWAT team chaplain, outdoor enthusiast, a guy involved with ropes, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, a chaotic Jedi, and who is a recipient of an honorary doctorate from the University of Adversity. Using these stories, we take the facts lead to concepts, and from the concepts we make a variety of life applications. Just a caveat about the facts. Most of the time we will tell you the facts just the way it happened, but once in a while we'll give you the facts the way other people remember how it happened, and that usually includes a tablespoon of embellishment. No harm is meant, just good, clean fun for educational purposes. Please subscribe and share this with your friends or your enemies. It might help them to be better people if they listen. As always, we thank you for keeping up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. Introducing the Bible degree with digital ministry. Paul used the marketplace and the synagogue to reach an expanded audience. We have access to the internet and social media. I once heard it said that when McDonald's introduced the drive-through window, they did not change the Big Mac, only how it was delivered. Faulkner University is now offering a new digital ministry track for their Bible degree. Faulkner's degree provides training in understanding and teaching the gospel, alongside training that will allow students to create quality digital content. Opportunities for evangelism in the digital spaces is unlimited, and this is innovative ministry education for our contemporary culture. One of the instructors is a 2-time Emmy-winning former ESPN designer. Members of the Church of Christ could be eligible for the full tuition Jack Zorn Scholarship in order to pursue this special area of study. For more information, contact admissions at faulkner.edu. That is admissions at faulkner.edu. Faulkner University is a digital partner with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. TKM Incorporated in Moss, Tennessee is a construction company that specializes in erosion control, seeding, and soil, hydroseeding, hydromulch, minor excavation, and silt fence. They also provide traffic control and construction signs. Their business is keeping people safe, but their passion, their mission, is they wish that all men could be saved. TKM has adopted the nickname the King's Men because as they serve you, they also serve the King. If they could provide any of their services for you, please contact them at 931-243-3958. That is 931-243-3958. Or you can contact them on the net at tkminc2001 at twlakes.net. That is tkminc2001 at twlakes.net. TKM Incorporated is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. In my defense, I was left unsupervised. She, being the lovely wife, handler, and trainer, was out of town, and I was batching it. Now, my day alone included taking the backstrap of a deer and slow cooking it in a crock pot for 12 hours, soaked in Sweet Baby Ray's sugar-free barbecue sauce. I ate breakfast at Casa de Waffles. I only ate protein. I had a double cheesesteak omelet on the side. I didn't get any carbs. I'm trying to be good while the wife is out of town. I did a small cardio workout. I attended a wrestling workout with a former Syracuse linebacker and an FBI defensive tactics instructor. After getting home from that, I set my climbing system up in a tree and practiced my saddle hunting from the tree in the backyard. And then for lunch, I ate anywhere I wanted. And then I rounded out the day by meeting some friends and spending the night on the river with my bow shooting fish. We fished from dark till daylight. And at dawn, I arrived back at my home with a cooler full of short-nosed or spotted gar. Now, gar come in several varieties in Alabama. You have the long-nosed gar. Those are those exceptionally long fish with a thin, long nose, thus their name. And then you have a short-nosed gar. I'll not explain that. And then you have a version of a short-nosed gar with spots, and they are called shock and surprise spotted gar. Many people don't eat garfish or garpike. They think they're trash fish, but actually they're pretty tasty, and I have developed a taste for them. But now cleaning them, getting to the good stuff is an adventure. They have these ganoid scales, and these scales are overlapping. They're serrated and they're ridged, and they're covered with a hard enamel. They're covered with something like dentine, and dentine is one of the four major components of your teeth. It's an impressively robust and resilient armor, and you really got to mean it to get past it. But once you get past it, once you get the armored hide off, they will yield two long strips of white fillet meat, much like the backstrap of a deer. You take this single or these dual pieces of meat off the back of the fish, and this piece of meat runs from where the end of the head stops and the very first fin on the back of that fish starts. And so, if you've got a fish the size of your arm, you've got a piece of meat about as long as your arm. You take these two long strips of white fillet meat and you cube it. I roll it in egg and buttermilk, and then I roll it in flour, and I deep fry it in olive oil. And then you can eat it with ketchup, ranch, or tartar sauce, and it tastes a lot like gator bites. As good as this stuff is, most people don't do it because they don't want to have to fight this fish to get the meat out of it. Getting this meat is an ordeal. I bought an attachment for my drill that uses a pair of sheet metal cutters. Now, I had to modify this by putting a piece of metal strapping on it so that when you engage the trigger, the whole thing doesn't rotate, doesn't spin. So I had to keep it from rotating so I could operate the thing one-handed. If you want to know what it's like to skin a gar, think about wrestling a rope that has teeth and thorns. And yes, you're going to get some on you. Gar aren't a particular bloody fish, but they're covered in a particular slime. Essentially, it's a mucus coating on their scales. And this mucus stuff that's on them serves as an antifungal, antibacterial, anti-parasitic coating, and also helps them to be hydrodynamic. This slime is on the fish, and they're almost impossible just to pick up barehanded. If you tried to pick one up, it would just slip right out of your hands. But this slime is quite pungent. The level at which this is unpleasant can vary depending on the waters of origin or the diet of the fish. Now, when I tell you that this stuff is pungent, let me preach on it. One night we were fishing, and basically all we shot were gar. We got in this big grass bed, and these big long-nosed gar were out there hunting the small fish, and we shot an impressive number of these fish. And these fish can get impressively large. The long-nosed version, I've got one on the wall that's 55 inches and another one that was 57 inches. I shot one that was 60, and I didn't have it mounted. But you think about, you've got a fish this long on the end of an arrow, and you're trying to put it into a bucket, and that fish doesn't want to go into the bucket. It's got an arrow stuck in him. They will twist and wiggle and flop, and they'll slap you, and this stuff gets all over you. Now, by daybreak, and who knows how many of those fish we'd shot that night, but by daybreak, I was covered in gar slime that had dried on my clothes. I was driving home by myself, and I was tired, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to stop and I'm going to have breakfast. And I walked into either a Jack's or a Hardee's, somewhere between Florence and Huntsville. And I walked in and was standing there by the counter. And the young lady behind the counter walked around the corner, and she stopped and said, a little fishy, huh? I explained to her that I had been up all night in the river shooting fish with a bow, and I was going to rest a little bit in the lobby, and I was going to eat breakfast while I was there. I placed my order, and I sat down in a booth and basically took a little nap. And I guess they had called for my order to be ready, and I didn't hear them. And then finally I hear over the loudspeaker, "Little fishy, your order's ready." I walked up to the counter, and I realized she had not asked me for my name, but printed on my ticket was the words, "Lil Fishy." I so wish I had saved that ticket. But back to the meat of the story. The meat strips, the back straps, the fillets, etc., are the only things you really keep off the fish. You can't eat gar roe, the eggs inside the gar. That's toxic to humans. You don't even eat the flesh that surrounds where those eggs could be kept. It contains a protein-based substance known as ichthyotoxin, and it'll make you really, really sick if you eat it. So other than the backstrap fillets, there's not much else to eat. So if you've got a bucket, if you've got a bowl full of fillets, then you've got a bucket full or a large trash bag of gar skeletons, internal organs, gar heads, and the aforementioned slime. The sun is coming up at my house. The gar McNuggets are in the freezer. The utensils have been cleaned. The power tool has been oiled, and it was time to take a nap. Upon waking, I got involved in some other stuff. I mowed the lawn. I did some work modifying my hunting platform, and I generally moved through my day in a zombie-esque fugue and neglected to take care of one essential errand: gar parts. Not car parts, but gar parts. Sunday arrived, and I did my normal routine. I got up, I got ready, I bathed, I shaved, I dressed, and I headed to worship, and I was going to teach a class that day and preach at the PM service. As I made a turn around one of the corners, headed toward the church building, something in the bed of the tactical Toyota made a thud, and I remembered the undone errand. I remembered I had dismembered gar in a thick lawn bag and a Home Depot bucket in the bed of my truck. Now, normally on the same day that I clean the gar, I take them up and I put them in a green field and I spread them out for fertilizer in one of the places that I hunt. Well, now I've got them in the bed of my truck and I'm headed to church. I can't take them to church. Not that gar don't need church, but dead gar have no need of sanctification nor edification. Their life choices have been made at this point. So I came up with an emergency plan and I decided to put the whole mess into a dumpster. Permission to use said dumpster being implied rather than granted. Now, what I should have done is pulled up next to the dumpster, climbed into the bed of my truck, picked up the orange Home Depot bucket, held it over the top, and emptied it. But I was in a hurry. I was wearing my dress clothes. I was dressed for worship. I didn't want to climb into the bed of the pickup truck. And so all I did was just reached over the bed of the truck, and it's almost too tall for me to reach in since I've got the new tires on it. And I lifted the bag out of the bucket. And as I did so, I was assaulted with the overnight accumulation of scent molecules that had settled into the bottom of the bucket and now had been freed and was wafting about on the breeze because I had created this stirring of the air by moving this bag out of the bucket. Oh, it was nasty. In order to avoid the smell, I attempted simply to rocket the bag into the open dumpster. And in my attempt to sling the bag into the dumpster, I failed to notice the slime streamers from the bag. You see, dead gar skeletons have pointy things on them. Gar armor and gar hide have sharp edges, and I guess they indeed can perforate a bag. You see, I tried to toss the bag, and as I did, the slime streamers slung about everywhere. I attempted to get this into the dumpster, into the receptacle, and not get anything on me, and I noticed instantly that I had failed. I saw slime streaks on my gray pants. And I typically don't show up at church in tiger striped camo. My first thought was, well, maybe it'll dry and nobody will notice. I hopped into the truck. I closed the door and I was trapped inside. Disgusting. The smell had followed me, and I'm not sure if the smell was on my pants or just lingering in my nostrils. But I drove to the building, and I could still smell the stench. we have an old gag in some of the skits we do. We have this series of skits where we talk about different scenarios on the elevator to heaven. And in one of the original skits with the elevator to heaven, a spiritual snob is on the elevator and he's complaining about a homeless man on the elevator. And he complains and he says, "He smells." And the elevator driver says, well, actually, he stinks and you smell, but that's just a technicality. That was my first thought. I can't walk into the church building or be around these church people. What if I stink and they smell? It reminded me of an episode with Jackie one time when we first moved to Huntsville. And you got to remember, she's 19 or 20 years old, and she's playing shortstop in a ladies' softball league. And somebody hits this really hot midfield shot. It goes bouncing toward the shortstop position. She bends down to scoop her glove. It takes a bad hop, and it smacks her right in the side of the face, breaks her glasses. She scoops the dirt up with her glasses and throws it in the air, shakes it off, and plays the rest of the ball game. The minute she gets into the truck, she starts crying. I go, "What is wrong with you?" She said, "Well, I couldn't cry in front of everybody else." Well, the next morning we get up. She'd play ball on like a Saturday evening, and then the next morning we get up to go to church, and she's got this beautiful shiner. That little eye's black and blue and purple and green, and she's crying, looking in the mirror, holding her little makeup brush, and she says, "Jonesy, please don't make me go." Like I could make her go. That's not the way our relationship works. But as beautiful, as stunningly beautiful as my wife is, she didn't want to go to the church building in front of the older people and let them see her face with a bruise or a stain or a black eye. I'm pretty comfortable in my own skin. I've never been shy about going into places where the atmosphere might be hot or cold. I am persona non grata at a few places, if not unwanted, just unwelcome. There's a section, and all churches have spectrums of conservative and liberal and ins and outs and theological differences. There's a section of the fellowship of the religious people that I hang out with. There's a section of that fellowship and a few schools and even a school of thought and at least one school of preaching that would tell you I stink. And I try not to think about it too much. I've jokingly said I've been asked to leave several places, but have been thrown out of none. But really never been uncomfortable even going into the places where I knew I might be at odds with somebody. I'm fairly comfortable with who I am and fairly comfortable with who I'm not. But here I was, uncomfortable about going into my own home church. Here I was uncomfortable going in and facing my people, my friends, my fellow believers, the people who are religiously and theologically simpatico with me. And yet here I was uncomfortable and unsure about walking in. What if I stink and what if they smell? I know. I'll sneak inside and pull one of the leaders aside and I'll ask if I'm okay to go in. I'll ask one of the members, "Hey, do you notice anything wrong with me?" I'll get one of my close friends and I'll just ask him, "Hey, do I stink? And do you smell?" I've never understood why people are hesitant to visit a church. Oh, I get my wife not wanting to go in with her black eye, but I've never understood why people were hesitant to visit a church. I've never understood it until now. What if there's something about me that makes people uncomfortable with me? What if there's something about me that makes me uncomfortable with me? What if they know? What if they notice? And it's not just that I think I stink, but what if they smell? What if they sniff out my secret, my nervousness? What if they smell the stuff that got on me? What if they notice or know about the dirt, the grime, the slime? I didn't do it on purpose. But I wasn't being smart, and I wasn't being totally innocent when I got slimed. But here I am standing outside the building, and I'm worried about being around clean people. I'm worried what will the clean people think, and if they notice that I have obvious signs of being tainted or contaminated. I have the confidence that I love these people and they love me, and I decided to go in anyway. That doesn't mean they won't tease me, but I decided to go in anyway, and I sang and I prayed and I listened and I gave and I communed and I fellowshipped and I even taught. I didn't hide in a corner or avoid people, and if they smelled, they didn't say a word. If anybody saw the stains, real or imagined, they didn't point them out, and I didn't catch anyone staring. Years and years ago, when I first started my private practice, a client got referred to me, and he didn't bathe. He would end up being the most severe case of obsessive-compulsive disorder that I've ever met in my entire career. But he was also schizophrenic, and he was dealing with unbearable, complicated grief. All the previous therapists that he'd gone to had told him, do not come back until you've had a bath. And he didn't bathe, and he didn't return. But I saw him. I never said a word about how he smelled. I dealt with his grief. I dealt with some of his obsessions and some of his compulsions, and we developed a relationship. We developed a rapport. After about 6 visits, he asked me whether or not I had noticed his odor. And I told him that I had. And he asked, was it bad? I told him it was real bad. And he asked me why I never made an issue of it. And I told him that wasn't his worst problem. You see, if we could cure the grief, if we could address the delusions, if we could educate him about the anxiety, then probably the bathing would take care of itself. It's a false notion that only clean people attend church. It's a false notion that only clean people are welcomed at church. Cleaned people attend church, and once we realize the difference in clean and cleaned, once we recognize that the difference is that at one time, and even still, all of us were stained or slimy, and sometimes we still get that way, but we go to church for cleansing. And it's not that only clean people attend church, but cleaned people attend church. You see, people don't come to our churches to learn our dress code, to learn our vocabulary, or modify the habits that we find disgusting, offensive, or are not approved of. They come to church to find relief from sin, to cope with hurt, to find hope, to find love, and to meet a God who loves them no matter what was on them when they came in trying to find him. You don't get clean and find God. You find God and get cleansed. Using the tool of shortwave radio, World Christian Broadcasting literally covers the world every day with the gospel. They use 2 large curtain antennas. One is located in Anchor Point, Alaska, and the other in Madagascar. They send out messages that are recorded at their international home in Franklin, Tennessee. They make available 40 hours of broadcast every day. The broadcasts are made in English, Chinese, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, English for Africa, and Arabic. They would love for your group to visit them. You can bring your ladies group, your youth group, or your men's group. Just give them a call at 615-371-8707, 615-371-8707, or you can go to 3Ws and a dot, worldchristian.org, find the Donate Here button, and make a financial contribution to support this work that literally covers the world every day with the gospel. World Christian Broadcasting, in cooperation with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure.